Hello and good morning. Happy Saturday morning. I hope my YouTube audience is feeling well today. It is a misty day here in Joliet, Illinois. Dang it. Oh, crap. No matter how I get everything set up, something always happens. Hold on. Hold on. Oh. So, it is a cloudy day in Joliet, Illinois. It's going to rain. And wow. Okay. So I'm not really feeling all that great. But I want to say this. The people in the world, you are smart. You are amazing. You are beautiful. And you are intelligent. But what I want people to realize is before I do my shows, when I get up in the morning, I'm always, okay, so there we go. Okay, so there we go. So, of course, they're probably messing with this show now because now I'm having reconnecting issues. Woo! So, I have been trying to tell people the people that are becoming woke to the programming, and I need you to understand this. The people that are becoming woke to the programming that was done to people. See, a lot of things were built by design to keep us fighting each other, fighting among the races, fighting over everything from what color is red. It was all built by design. And for my people, we got a number played on us, but we can't keep playing that number because we know the difference between right and wrong. So I ain't trying to hear none of that stuff now. Everybody knows the difference between right and wrong. Everybody knows what's good and what's evil. What a majority of people, because everybody don't know, because everybody ain't God's people. Some people are Lucifer, Satan, and the devils. Wolves come in sheep clothing. But y'all so programmed that y'all believe the wolves. Nobody wants to hear the truth. And as I've been just looking around, how you just sit back in this world and you look at what's going on. And even me, I have to check myself. What's bad is good. People condone the badness. That's from people in higher positions to community leaders to pastors to preachers to everybody. And all other dirty people, they stick together. All other dirty, low-life people stick together. Okay? They're going to stick together against a person that's just trying to do the right thing, person that's just trying to enjoy life and have fun. Now, back to the topic. As I've been telling people, when you really start doing your research, you will find out how the media, everything was built by design to keep us fighting against each other. And some of you idiots can't see it because you want to justify bad behavior. A low-down, dirty person is who they is. They made mistakes, but through redemption, everybody can get a chance. They might chance to start all over again. But as I was thinking, my goodness, you got people that wants Diddy to come home. We're looking at the Epstein files. I've been listening to some of the survivor stories. I had to go back and listen to some of the ladies who said R. Kelly allegedly abused them or was abused because he was found guilty, even though there was certain factors to the case. Like R. Kelly sits in jail for RICO, but Diddy walks free. So this is the way the government controls us, have us fighting against each other. Because truly, this is some behavior that has been going on for years. And some of these people really need help. And then again, some of them are just plain demons. There are demons in the world. But I come across this story on MK Ultra, and it was a program that was started by the CIA in the 50s to give people drugs to control them. Now I want you to listen to this. Maybe you people will finally realize a lot of things was built by design, and it's a little game being played with the people. By who, I don't know. But it's all divided and fighting. So, this is the story of the MK Ultra program.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. You may have heard stories about the CIA's secret experiments with LSD, through which 60s counterculture luminaries like Ken Kesey and Allen Ginsberg were first introduced to the drug. There's a lot more to the CIA's experiments with LSD, and some of it is pretty horrifying. My guest, journalist Stephen Kinzer, has spent several years investigating the CIA's mind control program, which was known as MK Ultra. LSD was just one of the mind-altering drugs that were tested in the program to see if and how they could be weaponized to control human behavior. Many of the unwitting subjects of these experiments were subjected to what amounts to psychological torture. The MK Ultra program was created by Sidney Gottlieb in 1953. He ran it until it was shut down in the early 60s. Gottlieb was also the CIA's chief chemist, creating poisons and innovative ways of surreptitiously administering them. He also became head of the CIA program that creates high-tech gadgets for spies to use. Stephen Kinzer's new book is called Poisoner in Chief, Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA's Search for Mind Control. One of Kinzer's previous books was about the Dulles brothers, Alan and John Foster Dulles. Alan Dulles was the CIA director during most of the years MK Ultra was in operation. Stephen Kinzer, welcome back to Fresh Air. Let's start with, what was the mission of MK Ultra?
During the early period of the Cold War in the late 40s and early 1950s, the CIA became paralyzed with a fear that communists had perfected some kind of a drug or a potion or a technique that would allow them to control human minds. This was actually a greatly exaggerated fear, but it played on something cultural that everybody that grew up in the early 20th century. We were fed a lot of books and movies about the idea of mind control, that you could hypnotize someone or give someone a drug that would make them do something that otherwise they would never do. Seized by this myth, the CIA not only believed that communists had approached or reached this holy grail, but that the CIA should also find out a way to do it. So MK Ultra was a project lasting up to 10 years in which the CIA sought to find ways to control the human mind. They wanted to be able to have a truth serum that would make prisoners say everything they knew, also an amnesiac in order them to do it, or even that they had carried out the actions at all. So MK Ultra was the most sustained search in history for techniques of mind control.
So LSD was created in 1943 by Dr. Albert Hofmann at the Sandoz Laboratories in Basel, Switzerland. How did the CIA find out about LSD?
As part of the search for drugs that would allow people to control the human mind, CIA scientists became aware of the existence of LSD, and this became an obsession for the early directors of MK Ultra. Actually, the MK Ultra director, Sidney Gottlieb, can now be seen as the man who brought LSD to America. He was the unwitting godfather of the entire LSD. He arranged for the CIA to pay $240,000 to buy the world's entire supply of LSD. He brought this to the United States, and he began spreading it around to hospitals, clinics, prisons, and other institutions, asking them through bogus foundations to carry out research projects and find out what LSD was, how people reacted to it, and how it might be able to be used as a tool for mind control. Now, the people who volunteered for these experiments and began taking LSD, in many cases found it very pleasurable. They told their friends about it. Who were those people? Ken Kesey, the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, got his LSD in an experiment sponsored by the CIA, by MKUltra, by Sidney Gottlieb. So did Robert Hunter, the lyricist for the Grateful Dead, which went on to become a great purveyor of LSD culture. Allen Ginsberg, the poet who preached the value of the great personal adventure of using LSD, got his first LSD from Sidney Gottlieb, although, of course, he never knew that name. So CIA brought LSD to America unwittingly. And actually, it's a tremendous irony that the drug that the CIA hoped would be its key to controlling humanity actually wound up fueling a generational rebellion that was dedicated to destroying everything that the CIA held dear and defended.
Even Timothy Leary, who turned a lot of people onto LSD and helped guide them through trips, he found out about LSD because of Sidney Gottlieb. He wasn't part of one of the experiments, but what's the connection?
You're absolutely right. Tim Leary, who became the great guru of LSD, first came across psychedelics through Sidney Gottlieb, although, like all these other people, you'd never heard Gottlieb's name because Gottlieb lived in complete invisibility. So Tim Leary's interest in psychedelic drugs was sparked by an article that appeared in Life magazine in 1957. It was about a couple of Americans who had gone to Mexico and found the magic mushroom that produces hallucinations. Leary was fascinated by this. He later went to Mexico, and before he ever tried LSD, he was using those magic mushrooms. What he did not know, and had no way of knowing, is that that expedition to Mexico that produced the Life magazine article was paid for by Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA. It was part of his effort, kinds of substances, including naturally occurring ones like shrubs and trees and barks and mushrooms and fish parts and animal pieces, as possible tools for mind control. So it's not surprising that later on in life, Tim Leary said the entire LSD movement was started by the CIA. If he had known better, he would have said it was founded by the CIA and, in particular, Sidney Gottlieb.
So just so I understand this correctly, so the CIA basically set up phony philanthropic foundations, which then funded university and college research, and it's through those research experiments that people like Ginsberg and Kesey and Robert Hunter got introduced to LSD. And the university researchers had no idea that their research was actually being funded by the CIA.
I think that's largely correct. So Stanford University was running a program in which they asked for volunteers to come in and try this new substance. Allen Ginsberg was one of the volunteers. So was Robert Hunter. A similar set of experiments was going on at the Menlo Park Veterans Administration Hospital. That's where Ken Kesey took LSD for the first time. He was so excited about it, he took a job in the hospital and began stealing the LSD to give it to his friends. That became the basis for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So all of these original strands that came together in the 60s to produce this great countercultural revolt based around LSD can be traced back through these bogus foundations to the CIA and ultimately the director of MKUltra, Sidney Gottlieb.
Now there's a much darker side to this program because a lot of people who were being experimented on, they were prisoners. I mean, they had no idea what they were being given. One of those prisoners was the famous gangster Whitey Bulger, who was serving time then for hijacking a truck, and he was in the Atlanta penitentiary. So he actually wrote something describing his experience. Can you give us a summary of what he said?
Whitey Bulger was one of the prisoners who volunteered for what he was told was an experiment aimed at finding a cure for schizophrenia. As LSD every day He later realized that this had nothing to do with schizophrenia, and he was a guinea pig in a government experiment aimed at seeing what people's long-term reactions to LSD was. Essentially, could we make a person lose his mind by feeding him LSD every day over such a long period? Bulger wrote afterward about his experiences, which he described as quite horrific. He thought he was going insane. He wrote, I was in prison for committing a crime, but they committed a greater crime on me. And towards the end of his life, Bulger came to realize the truth of what had happened to him. And he actually told his friends that he was going to find that doctor in Atlanta who was the head of that experiment program in the penitentiary and go kill him. Now, that doctor later died a natural death, so Bulger didn't get to carry out his wish. But Bulger was one of many prisoners across America who unwittingly were fed huge doses of LSD. And the reason for this was very simple. Gottlieb wanted to create a way to seize control of people's minds. And he realized it was a two-part process. First, you had to blast away the existing mind. Second, you had to find a way to insert a new mind into that resulting void. Well, he didn't get too far on number two, but he did a lot of work on number one, trying to find out how to destroy the mind of a human being. And that was the purpose of experiments that he carried out in prisons in the United States and at secret detention centers in Europe and East Asia.
And he worked with some pretty high-class torturers, too, from one of the Nazi doctors and the chief poisoner from Japan during World War II. How did they end up in his program?
One of the most remarkable discoveries that I made in the research for this book is that the CIA mind control project, MK-Ultra, was essentially a continuation of work that began in Japanese and Nazi concentration camps. Not only was it roughly based on those experiments, but the CIA actually hired the vivisectionists and the torturers who had worked in Japan and in Nazi concentration camps to come and explain what they had found out so that we could build on their research. For example, Nazi doctors had conducted extensive experiments with mescaline at the Dachau concentration camp. And the CIA was very interested in figuring out whether mescaline could be the key to mind control. That was one of their big avenues of investigation. So they hired the Nazi doctors who had been involved in that project to advise them. Another thing the Nazis provided was information about poison gases like sarin, which is still being used. Nazi doctors came to America, to Fort Detrick in Maryland, which was the center of this project, to lecture to CIA officers and tell them how long it took for people to die from sarin. And was there a difference in how long it took to die if you were a small child or an infant, whether you were an elderly person or whether you were a healthy middle-aged man? The only way to know this would be to have killed all those people. The CIA information. And actually, one of the things that is the most bizarre about the fact that we relied on Nazi doctors is that Sidney Gottlieb himself was Jewish, and his parents had emigrated from Central Europe in the early 20th century. If they had not emigrated, Sidney Gottlieb might well himself have been brought up in Central Europe, forced into a ghetto, brought to a concentration camp, and become the subject of one of the CIA officer with the doctors who conducted those experiments.
Yeah, I found that pretty hard to understand. But, also Kurt Blome, one of the Nazi doctors who was hired by Sidney Gottlieb, was on trial in Nuremberg. He was acquitted, but he was one of the Nazi doctors who was tried. And the Nuremberg Code established that if you are conducting experiments, that the person you are experimenting on needs to give informed consent. And of course, MK-Ultra totally violated the Nuremberg Code, but apparently the U.S. never signed on to that, never adapted that.
If the United States had used the Nuremberg Code domestically, Sidney Gottlieb would never have been able to do what he did. There couldn't have been MK-Ultra. What Sidney Gottlieb did is exactly what we sentenced Nazi doctors to death after the Second World War for doing in concentration camps.
It wasn't just a question of administering these super high doses of LSD for very extended periods of time. But there was also like questioning and other kind of testing that went along with the administration of these high doses. Tell us about that.
Gottlieb and the CIA established secret detention centers throughout Europe and East Asia, particularly in Japan, Germany, and the Philippines, which were largely under American control in the period of the early 50s, and therefore Gottlieb didn't have to worry about any legal entanglements. In these places, he carried out his most extreme experiments, some undoubtedly fatal. We don't know how many people died, but a number did, and many lives were permanently destroyed. So what you found in these Europe experiments was a confluence of two interests, both that preoccupied the CIA. Number one was Gottlieb's desire to find the key to mind control, which the CIA...
Wow. So, this keeps reconnecting. If you want to learn more about the MK Ultra program, that's my mom's graduation picture. Those are my parents. This is when we gave my mother's a birthday party. But if you want to learn more about the MK Ultra program, just Google it. You know, the CIA, the United Snakes of America, the United Snakes of America, its affiliates, the CIA, everybody. People have been doing stuff to the American people and people from other countries for so long. This is just the tip of the iceberg on them bringing LSD to the United Snakes of America, giving it to doctors to experiment. So, for some of you people that don't want to believe that women of color and Caucasian women were given different prenatal vitamins, children of color was given different things, you better wake up. You better wake up. So stop arguing with people. Stop hating people because they don't agree with you. Because a lot of this was built by design. This is April Showers. Thanks for joining me today.